Good morning, everyone. This is Debbie Royce, Empire State Development's Corporate Secretary. I'd like to welcome everyone to this morning's meeting. Before we formally begin, I would ask everyone to please mute your audio unless you're speaking. As we have our directors joining by video this morning, we'll do a quick roll call before we get started. Steve Cohen.
Present.
Hilda Rosario Escher.
Present.
Eric Gertler.
Present.
Cesar Perales.
Present.
Superintendent of Department of Financial Services, Linda Lacewell.
Present.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. And Chairman Cohen, you're ready to begin.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. I now call to order a meeting of the directors of the New York State Urban Development Corporation, doing business as Empire State Development, for Thursday, April 22nd, 2021. Before we get started, I'll ask everybody to please mute your audio until you are ready to speak. Also, for the record, I will ask that anyone wishing to speak, please be sure to state your name before you begin, especially if you are not on the video. I'd like to note for the record that due to the public health concerns and as authorized by an executive order of the governor, this meeting is being conducted by video and teleconference. I note for the record that the public was given an opportunity to comment on the agenda items by submitting written comments by 4:30 p.m. yesterday. I'd like to state for the record that no comments were received from the public concerning any of today's agenda items. As always, the directors have received the written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time during the presentations. At this time, I will ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on the agenda. And if so, I will ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record. And I will then remind everyone to recuse yourself from any discussion or vote with regard to such item. Any recusals for this board meeting? Hearing none, we'll move to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the board minutes for the March 25th, 2021 directors meeting. I will note that those minutes have been distributed. Everybody has had an opportunity to review them. Any questions, comments, additions, or deletions, speak now. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion for approval.
Motion.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion carries, and we get to our first substantive bit of business with Pravina. Pravina, are you there?
Yes, Chairman Cohen, I'm here.
Well, we would love to hear you with items related to the Reimagine Workforce Preparation Grant Program and the COVID-19 Pandemic Small Business Recovery Grant Program. And we will hold a vote on both. I'm supposed to note that we will hold our vote until Pravina presents both of these items. And so we'll do it at the end of her presentation. Pravina, go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. Good morning, directors. I am here to present two items. The first one is the statewide Reimagine Workforce Preparation Grant Program. This is funding that we will be receiving from the U.S. Department of Education as a part of their Reimagine Workforce Preparation Grant Program. A joint submission was sent by New York State between the New York State Department of Labor, SUNY, CUNY, and ESD. As part of this, the grant is to train out of place and displaced workers due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular for ESD to support entrepreneurship training across the state for these workers. We will be doing this in conjunction with our partnership with our Entrepreneurship Assistance Centers. Today, we are requesting your approval to take the actions to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the New York State Department of Labor, as they're the prime on this grant opportunity. And in addition, to be able to issue up to $22,000 annually for the next 3 years to the Entrepreneurship Assistance Centers, and also to issue an RFP to gain 4 additional what we call Reimagine Workforce Centers, which will come from our hotspots and incubators to also provide additional training. The training, as I said, is to look at educating and letting people know about entrepreneurship as an alternative path for employment. The Entrepreneurship Assistance Centers have been doing that work for the past 30 years, so they're prime partners to do this with us, as well as trying to work with our hotspots and incubators, which also do this across the state, to provide master classes as well as webinars and one-on-one training for displaced workers across New York State. The entire grant is for $3.2 million for over three years. The money will be going to the entrepreneurship centers, the 4 selected RWCs, which will be coming back at a later board meeting to let you know who they are once the RFA is complete. And then also additional to have 1 extra additional headcount to help support the program over the next 3 years with the federal funding. That's the first item. I'm happy to pause and take any questions.
Yeah, just an item of clarification. I either misheard you or you may have misspoken. You said that the grants are $22,000 a year for 3 years per center. Am I correct that that's $22,000 per participant per center per year?
It's $22,000 for the entire center, not per. Yes.
How many centers are there?
21 centers.
There are 21. Tell me how the 3.2 million works then. It's $3.2 million.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So that's $456,000 for the 21 EAC centers, and then in addition, we'll be selecting an 4 extra Reimagine Workforce centers, which will be getting $114,000 per year, and then the additional 456 is for ESD to be able to hire 1 person per year.
And and it's over the course of 3 years. Okay, I got you.
Over the course of 3 years. Yep.
It's basically $1 million a year, all in over 3 years. Okay.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions?
Linda Lacewell, just to follow up on the chair, Pravina, and I think you may have alluded to this. The centers, the various institutions that receive these funds to disperse, they're being chosen how?
So the EAC centers go through an open competition. They have a RFA. They are already centers that we have under contract. So that was how they were chosen. There's 21 of them altogether. And then the new Reimagine Workforce centers will be chosen through an RFA that is going out next week, where it's only the incumbents are hotspots, New York State hotspots and incubators that can apply to that funding. And we will competitively choose them from the 30 centers we have there.
Are these grants specifically meant to address economic fallout from COVID, or are they more general than that?
They are specific to ensuring that entrepreneurship training is done to individuals, dispersed individuals who lost their job during COVID-19.
So are you confident that the various centers cover the geography necessary to reach the individuals that we're trying to help? In other words, those who were affected, and we're not inadvertently going to leave out pockets of communities that might be otherwise unable to apply?
Yep, we're very confident. So right now our EAC centers are doing this work already. They've seen a 40% increase in entrepreneurship across the state. They are located all in the region, and they work in low, moderate income distressed areas. And to supplement that, we have our regional workforce, the hotspots and incubators, which are also in every region. And part of this is also to make sure things go in different languages. So we have also that language capability with these partners, as well as to ensure that there are actual physical locations in case people can't get anywhere. But on top of that, we will be also offering all the programs online to get to more individuals, as well as doing master classes so that people can attend at all different hours.
Good. So wherever I reside in the state, if I'm eligible, I should have a way to apply.
Yes.
Okay.
If you're eligible, you should just attend a class. Yeah, it's a free class. You don't even have to apply. You can just attend a class. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
What is the
You're
difference between the entrepreneurial centers and the Reimagine New York centers?
The difference is, so the EACs currently, there are 21 across the state, and they provide the 60-hour training class. Of course, you know very well, Director. And then the Reimagine Workforce centers are going to be from our hotspots and incubators, which hit a different set of the population because they hit more towards the innovation and tech entrepreneurs, and they provide training. So the reason is we didn't win enough money to give all 30 hotspots and incubators, so we're asking them to compete for that, whereas we had enough funding to make sure that all 21 EAC centers have done it. And usually the hotspots and incubators, they are a little different in their model because they tend to go towards, like I said, innovation sector. So we know that those entrepreneurs have been out as well. So this will be something supplementing what they do, as well as to help those companies figure out if entrepreneurship or commercialization path is available to them. So it's just trying to get to all entrepreneurs, not just one sector or the other. That's where the difference between the two. EACs tend not to do that sector as much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was involved with the entrepreneurial centers as president and CEO of Ibero-American Action League. So I'm not longer there, so I don't know if I should recuse myself from voting.
Liz, are you on the line?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear
Yes.
you.
So, all right. So, Hilda, thanks for thinking of that. If you're no longer involved with them, then there's no reason to recuse yourself on that.
Thank you.
Okay, Pravina, you want to go to the COVID-19 Pandemic Small Business Recovery Grant Program?
Sure. So as part of the New York State budget that was just passed, there was an $800 million small business grant program. And in part of that funding for that program is to allow for assistance to small businesses to apply for both the federal programs, which are out, and the upcoming ones like the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant and the Restaurant Resiliency Program. In addition, New York State, and in particular ESD, will be launching a $800 million small business grant. And to make sure that entrepreneurs as well as small businesses are prepared and get the one-on-one counseling that they need to be able to apply for these grants. We did similar grants such as this last year in March. This board approved, which was at the beginning of the pandemic. And those grants were able to help almost over 68,000 small businesses get almost $400 million of federal funding. We're looking to do something similar to this as well this time around to help them get not only the federal funding, but also additionally the state funding that will be forthcoming, not only in the $800 million grant, but also the subsequent tax programs and other initiatives that have been part of the state budget. We are authorized, this will be a two-part type of, similar to the other one, two parts. The first is to authorize immediately the 21 entrepreneurship assistance centers and the small business development centers, which there are 23, SUNY RF being the lead center that helps manage the program, to give grants up to $200,000 to the entrepreneurship the centers so that they can provide immediately the assistance needed for the federal programs, which are out already. And then we will also be issuing another request for proposals to get between 20 to 30 additional resource partners to actually make sure that we hit other pockets, similar to the previous discussion, to ensure that we have other pockets and other providers. Given the amount of funding that is available, we want to make sure every small business that has access to get either the federal or the state funding has a resource. So we will be doing that RFA in the next few weeks and come back to the board when those partners are chosen. But this is to get immediately started. The program will not exceed $10 million. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
It's probably premature, and since you're coming back to the board, and hopefully it's next month, I would love to get a report on what that outreach looks like, what sources and information you're using for that outreach, and is there a data component to how you're trying to find people who would, as Commissioner Lacewell, Superintendent Lacewell recently mentioned, to sort of make sure that we're identifying the right set of potential recipients.
Yeah, I'm happy to give some pre-thoughts that we're doing, but we are looking more into data. We know that there are very good chambers of commerce, community organizations, as well as our partners at Department of State who work with the Office of New Americans. We're going to be talking to all of them. We also have some experience. I shudder to bring this word, census. We also worked with a lot of different nonprofits as well. We'll also provide this technical assistance. We are looking for partners who are already providing small business assistance. So this is more about supplementing their programs to allow them to provide more counselors. In addition, legal and accounting resources, because those will be very critical in the upcoming applications to make sure that these small businesses understand their accounting, because they will need to be being applied based on revenue losses, as well as making sure that they have all their legal documents in place. So developing those resources so that it's not business counseling, but also a full package so that they can be able to apply quickly and completely so that they can get the money quicker.
Any questions?
Yeah, Linda Lacewell again. Pravina, maybe also when you come back to the board, this is obviously quite a large sum of money ultimately, right? These grants, 800 million, et cetera, et cetera. Would love to hear what our proactive plan is going to be to reduce the risk of fraud or misuse or waste of these funds, to try to be, proactive to get ahead of this. And I'm sure there's been thought given to it already, but I would love to hear how proactive we're going to be, and do we need advice on that? Are we getting advice on that? Whether it's the IG or some other suitable party with experience who can say, these are the best practices you need in this kind of program. Because the program is very important, obviously. The goals are very important, and it can do a lot of good. And we don't want that in any way to be undermined by any thought or indicia that the funds were not all expended for the good of all. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, I understand. And yes, we are definitely doing that thinking now in the layout and what we're requiring, so we don't make it too onerous on the small business, but also ensuring that we minimize fraud, waste, and abuse so that we ensure that the money gets to the correct small businesses so that they can use it. And happy to talk more about that program. You will all be learning more about that program soon once we have the details ready, because this board will have to approve the guidelines and as well as the way path we move forward. So I'm happy to bring that up at an upcoming board meeting so that that everyone understands it. We've done that pressure test.
My suggestion is, whether you're ready for board approval or not, that at the next board meeting, you come and just give us a status report so that the board has a sense of how it's progressing.
Yes, happy to do so.
Okay, and I'm sure Debbie will make sure that we follow up on that, because I will instantaneously forget.
Look, I think we should consider, does ESD have the resources to address that issue, or do we need some kind of other help? I mean, it's certainly normal course that when there's a large pool of money being expended, it's understood part of the administrative cost is guarding against fraud, which is, well-spent resources to protect the larger sum. So just would encourage folks, ESD is not that large. And let's make sure we have all the help we need.
And Linda, let me just address that, because I know that Simonita Sabatic from the governor's office is also talking to Pravina about this. And my assumption is, I know Eric's deeply involved in this, and I think the assumption here is that there is going to have to be, in a variety of ways, outside resources brought in to help manage this, as Pravina already alluded to. So we're looking forward to hearing sort of how this shapes up at the next board meeting.
Good, thank you.
If there are no other questions, I will now entertain a motion for approval of both of these items. By the way, let me ask a question. Given that, what exactly at this moment are we approving?
Sure, no problem. On the first, the reimagine workforce, I'll eventually be able to say that word. We're approving the ability to give the entrepreneurship assistance centers up to $22,000 in grants, which would go out under the grant disbursement agreements. And then we'll come back for the RW centers. And under the $10 million, we're approving to give up to $200,000 grants to the EACs and SPDCs also up immediately, so that they can start doing their work to keep counselors and hire more counselors to help the small businesses.
Any questions on that by anybody? If not, I'll entertain a motion on both. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposition? The motion carries. We now turn to the much anticipated President's report by the ever patient and ever insightful Eric Gertler. Eric?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and despite our many conversations to lower expectations, that seems to have, my persuasive ways have seemed to have failed here, so I will have to go forward as is, but.
I know what's coming. I don't want to lower expectations because you would exceed them anyway.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, fellow board members, and I hope everybody is doing well. On a macro level, since our last meeting, we continue to see very positive effects of vaccinations across the state, both in terms of vaccines administered, increased eligibility. At this point, we have administered almost 14 million vaccinations, 13,750,000, with 42.6% of New Yorkers with at least one dose. And at the same time, with our continued observance of public health and safety guidance, capacity restrictions are being loosened and more of our state economy is being reopened. And I think it's critical that as we look at the positivity rate, which now is well below 3%, it's the lowest since November 5th. This gives the governor and all New Yorkers the ability to continue to open up the economy, and that is what is critical. And that is obviously an important role that Empire State Development and everybody at this agency continues to play. So just to give you some recent examples, today is the start of the spring meet at Belmont Park, soon to be the new home of the Islanders, and spectators will be allowed trackside at a 20% capacity. Earlier this week, the governor announced that capacity increases at movie theaters starting next Monday, and museums, aquariums, zoos, and botanical gardens can open at 50% capacity next Wednesday. And with an eye on one of our chairman's great interests, NHL hockey, as well as NBA playoffs, large-scale indoor arenas and vet venues can expand to 25% in mid-May. So these are all, really great signs for the future of our economy as we continue to build back stronger, as we continue to renew, reimagine, and rebuild our economy. And what is important for us to remember as an agency is that ESD touches all parts of the economy and all parts of the state, and we truly do play an important role in helping this economy to rebuild. So just a few examples from our last meeting, and give you a sense of the different things that we do around the state. In Western New York, Sumitomo Rubber USA will be investing $122 million in its town of Tonawanda, in the plant there, creating 30 new jobs. The investment will allow tire production to nearly double to 17,500 tires daily. But this is a product of ESD being involved to help the facility, which was 100 years old, to modernize and to allow a more efficient manufacturing of tires in that plant to continue to be present, in Tonawanda. Across the 3 URI regions, the application window is now open for the 3rd round of Grow NY, our $3 million food and agriculture business competition. The first 2 rounds generated more than 460 applications from businesses in 32 states and 37 countries, and that program supports the emerging food and agriculture innovation cluster in Central New York, the Finger Lakes, and the Southern Tier. Also in the Southern Tier, Company USA is planning to locate a manufacturing plant in Steuben County to build seats for transportation industry projects, including Amtrak's next generation high-speed train sets, which are being manufactured by Alstom in nearby Hornell. And then lastly, just by way of example, in Mohawk Valley, Cold Point Corporation completed its 50,000 square foot manufacturing facility in Rome. This was a signature program in Rome's downtown revitalization initiative, the DRI plan, and a strategic site identified in the Erie Boulevard Brownfield Opportunity Area. And so, these are all just examples of all of the different ways that ESD plays a role in ensuring that New York State is building back better. And so, in closing, I want to keep my remarks brief, but also since the last board meeting, and most importantly, the governor and the state legislature reached an agreement on the budget for next fiscal year. And as the governor said, this has been probably the most important budget of his administration. I will not dig deep on the budget because we've asked Kevin Hansen to present more on the budget and certainly how it affects ESD and how ESD will figure prominently in the state's vision for a post-pandemic recovery. You heard from Pravina about new funding streams and tax credits that are being earmarked to support small businesses and restaurants and art organizations which have been afflicted by COVID. And, so many businesses are struggling. And that is really a critical part of the role that ESD will be playing in this post-pandemic recovery. You should know, Mr. Chairman and board members, that our teams are working diligently already to develop guidance for these programs so we can quickly and effectively get these vital grants to the groups and to the small business owners that are struggling. And so that really is, critical part of what ESD will be doing to help ensure that we can accelerate the post-pandemic recovery for this state. And then, as you may remember, last year I sent a memo to the board outlining several administrative release actions that I directed the agency to develop for businesses that have commitments owed to ESD. In my most recent correspondence to the board, I noted my strong recommendation to do that again this year, given the enormous lasting disruption that coronavirus has caused the global, national, and our statewide economy. So important to give businesses, that relief. I'll just end by saying that it always comes back to the people at this agency who continue to work so hard to push all of these efforts. And I continue to be proud to be part of this agency that, as you can see, has been entrusted with a very large role in the state's economic recovery. And I have no doubt that with this board and the staff at ESD, that unlike my speech, ESD will exceed all expectations. So thank you so much. Back to you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. You did once again exceed expectations, but I fear you will be outdone because, as you noted, up next is our Senior Vice President and Head of Public Policy, Kevin Hansen, who is going to give us what I'm sure will be a scintillating analysis of the most recently enacted budget and what it means for the agency and for the people of the state of New York. Kevin, I hope you're on the line, because with that introduction, it would be a real disappointment if you didn't come through.
I must say, Mr. Cohen, that I as well, when I think about budget discussions, scintillating is the word that always comes to mind.
Always.
Kevin, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioner. And after that, I wish I was the opening act, because the pressure is even higher now. Can everyone see the presentation?
We can.
Yep.
All right, great. Well, thank you, and good morning, directors. I am ESD's Senior Vice President and Head of Public Policy, and I'm here today, as people have described, to highlight some of the most significant economic development initiatives that are included in the coming year's budget. All right. So overall, this year's budget has been broadly talked about in three themes. The first theme is COVID management, and that covers investments in areas like public health, vaccinations, telehealth, and related healthcare system reforms. The second theme has been COVID relief, which includes measures to support a lot of the groups that we know have faced some of the most severe economic hardships, like small restaurants, arts institutions, unemployed workers, and renters. And finally, New York's future, investing to really reimagine, reconstruct, and renew the state for a post-COVID world. And I'm really just going to focus today on economic development initiatives including both some of those that will be implemented directly by ESD, like the new small business grant programs, and also some of the initiatives that maybe aren't necessarily going to be administered by ESD, but are likely to be significant to the state's economy. And, I think as has been alluded to, I think you'll see that ESD is going to play a role in all three aspects of these themes. So before we get into the state's budget, I thought it was important to highlight that, the role of the federal government will be as significant this year, I think, as it ever has been to the state in modern times. And specifically, the state expects to receive, I believe, $12.6 billion in some fairly flexible direct fiscal relief, thanks to the American Rescue Plan. And that's really just the amount going to the state government. There are also numerous other federal programs that are going to be providing, billions of dollars for things like unemployment insurance, as well as a lot of federal programs that haven't really been awarded yet, but could provide more funding opportunities for New York State and potentially ESD in areas like broadband, small business credit, semiconductor manufacturing, and tourism, to name a few. With that, let's take a look at a few of the highlights in the state budget this year. So the first theme, COVID management, I think people are pretty aware at this point that ESD has been doing a lot of work on the state's COVID response, from business communication to helping small businesses access federal funding. And over the past year, another area of emphasis has been working to identify New York-based companies who could retool their business lines and pivot to manufacturing vital public health supplies. So far, we've committed nearly $22 million in grants to 39 qualifying New York State-based companies who are now in the process of producing essential supplies like personal protective equipment for the state's ongoing response. And so this year's budget, continues some necessary appropriations that will allow us to make these grants as needed. Another way the state is working to mitigate future interruptions to some of the health supplies that we really found ourselves, working hard to procure, I think, back last year, and reduce dependence on overseas products is the state's new Medical Supplies Act. And what this legislation basically does is, if the state is contracting for over $50,000 worth of certain medical supplies, it'll typically require the state to have such products be substantially made in the U.S., provided that doing so does not conflict with the public interest, for example, in the event of a domestic shortage. Shifting to COVID economic relief, perhaps the most significant new program in the budget for ESD, which we continue, at least a few of us, to refer to as, the year of the small business, is the one-time $800 million small business recovery grant program. And the main purpose of this program, as it's outlined in the legislation, is to really provide retrospective financial relief to a lot of the small businesses that suffered the most hardship as a result of the pandemic. But as Pravina walked through earlier, some of these funds will also be used to help small businesses access the billions of dollars in federal assistance that continue to be provided by Congress. So things like the $25 billion restaurant revitalization fund, I think the $16 billion shuttered venue operator grant program, and others. And, the fact that I think we're mere days since the passage of the budget, and the agency is already taking action to stand up more resources to help businesses apply for these programs, some of which haven't even opened yet, I think is a real testament to Pravina and the small business team. And, as I think many of you have heard before, at ESD, we often say that small businesses are the backbone of the state's economy. And, worth highlighting again that they account for 98% of all businesses and over half of private sector jobs. So this program should help a lot of those businesses keep their doors open and mitigate their losses. Another area in which the pandemic continues to really weigh on the state's economy is in travel, as I'm sure many of you know, hitting the tourism industry particularly hard. And, that's, I think, broadly crafted, but especially includes sectors like arts, entertainment, and lodging. And as the state continues to advance its science-based reopening efforts that Eric mentioned, the state budget includes additional funding that we hope will help increase visitation and revitalize the tourism economy, including, just to name a few examples, $15 million in competitive funding for the Market New York initiative, which supports marketing and capital projects to promote regional tourism. It also includes $3.5 million in tourism matching funds, which help support the work of our county and regional tourism promotion agency partners. And it also includes tens of millions in new marketing funding to help return tourism levels back to their record-breaking levels. Within the tourism industry, performing arts have been among the hardest hit industries from the pandemic. And I think many people think about shuttered venues like those on Broadway as cultural amenities, but they're also major economic contributors, estimated to be responsible in a recent New York State Department of Labor report for 87,000 direct and indirect jobs and a $14.7 billion direct annual economic impact. And so to help expedite the reopening and revitalization of this industry, the state budget includes $100 million in tax credits that will offer assistance totaling 25% of qualified expenditures by some of these productions, up to a maximum of $3 million per production. And also for upstate venues, the state budget also offers an enhanced and extended $8 million tax credit, and there are some arts and cultural organization grants in the state budget as well. Restaurants and other food service businesses have also suffered during the pandemic, I think, as we all know, due to a significant decline in indoor dining. And so to help support these businesses and the communities they serve, the state budget includes a number of programs, in particular, $35 million in tax credits that will help offset the cost of small restaurants rehiring workers, as well as $25 million in grants that is focused on supporting restaurants that provide meals to distressed and underrepresented communities. And as I mentioned earlier, obviously ESD is going to try to help as many restaurants in the state access the federal funding as we can. Shifting to the third theme, New York's future, I think we routinely hear about how our state's infrastructure plan is the largest among any state. And I think this total comes from $100 billion allocated between the years 2015 and 2019, and $211 billion for the years 2020 to 2024. And in this year's budget, the state's plan increased by $36 billion, thanks to the inclusion of major new initiatives, including things like Empire Station, the Belmont Station redevelopment, a $3 billion Environmental Bond Act, transportation programs, housing programs, and many others. One key area of the state's infrastructure that really we continue to invest into growing is the green economy. And just for perspective, as of 2019, there were about 164,000 clean energy jobs in the state, and that represented growth of about 16% since 2015. And so this year's budget continues to double down on this area, including $8.9 billion in investment coming from the largest procurement of renewable energy by a U.S. state in history, a $2 billion, 250-mile-long green energy transmission project, and the second installment of a total $100 million commitment to help support upstate transit agencies transition to electric buses. To improve equity and access to broadband infrastructure, which I think we've all seen the importance of in the past year and change, the state budget includes new legislation that requires internet service providers to offer an affordable $15 per month high-speed internet plan to qualifying low-income households. The state will also require providers to advertise this plan to make sure that the programs reach some of the underserved populations across the state that we've been talking about. To further bridge the gap, the state has also partnered with Schmidt Futures and the Ford Foundation to launch an initiative called Connect Ed NY, an emergency fund that's expected to provide about 50,000 students in economically disadvantaged school districts with free internet access through June of next year. And obviously, this mandate comes on the heels of ESD's leadership of the new New York broadband program, which is helping to secure broadband access for 99% of the state, 99.9% rather, which I know makes us the envy of a lot of other state broadband offices. New York State already has the nation's leading MWBE program, with the past year seeing, I believe, a record 29.5% utilization and contracts worth over $3 billion awarded to minority or women-owned businesses. And to build on the success, as we try each year, this year, in partnership with the Reimagine New York Commission, ESD will be launching an entrepreneurship navigator to provide customized services and streamlined access to startup programs that will help incubate minority and women entrepreneurs in the technology and innovation sector. And I think we have something like 70 centers in our NYSTAR portfolio alone. And so, this, I think, will be a resource for helping entrepreneurs connect with the resources that are most beneficial to them. Around the same time that the budget was passed, legislation called, I believe, the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, or MRTA, was also passed to legalize adult recreational cannabis use under a comprehensive regulatory framework that considers things like protecting consumers, promoting equity, and generating new revenues and economic development. And, I think the economic significance of this is pretty notable. I think from a tax collection standpoint alone, the state believes it could reach $350 million annually. And there's also the potential for this new industry to create between 30,000 and 60,000 jobs. So, I'm sure ESD will ultimately be a partner in this effort as well. Launched in 2011, the state's 10 regional economic development councils, as we know, develop long-term strategic plans for economic growth in each of their regions. And the state budget includes an additional $750 million in resources this year for a new round of awards that I think in particular will target assistance to impacted industries and support job creation and retention. Finally, the state's budget also continues to invest in communities through the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, or DRI program, and includes another $100 million for this year's round. Through its first 4 rounds, 40 communities received awards of $10 million each to help develop local plans and fund projects that help reimagine their urban centers in their own visions. And I'm sure that this will be particularly helpful after the past year. So to wrap up, I think you can probably tell that ESD has been charged with a lot, as we always are, and in consideration that we have the potential for well over $1 billion in new state spending, as well as the opportunity to compete for perhaps hundreds of millions more in federal investments, it's going to be a very, very busy year for the ESD team. With that, Excelsior to the fiscal year 22, and I'm not sure if it was as scintillating as the last report, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Any questions?
It's Linda Lacewell, just more of a comment. I mean, first of all, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. And it was quite scintillating and graphically beautiful. I do want to underscore, you're exactly right, a lot is being given to ESD, and that entails a lot of responsibility for this organization. I hope, Eric, you and the team are taking a look at ESD, how it's staffed. Do we have the right people? Do we have the people we need? I know it's been a tough year with the pandemic and economic turndown, but we've got a pretty awesome responsibility here. And we need to move forward as strongly as we can, right, given all the circumstances.
No, thank you, Linda. Point well taken. And we've looked at both internal resources and external resources to ensure that we can manage these programs efficiently, but also responsibly, as you say. So point well taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I completely agree with Linda's praise of the presentation, and I also note that I did find it visually beautiful. So thanks. We're now going to turn to Glendon McCleary, ESD's Vice President and Director of Loans and Grants, to present a summary of those projects. But before we do, I just want to take a minute or two to exercise the small amount of discretion I may have as the chair. And I'll note a few things. By the way, I am remiss in not noting that yesterday was the 70th anniversary of the infamous Barilko goal that the Leafs scored to beat the Canadiens. I'm sure still a sore point all these years later for Mr. Gertler. And then Barilko, curiously enough, disappeared. Ultimately, it turned out that he had been in a plane crash. So I wouldn't want that moment, which is a metaphor for something, to go unnoticed. It was the beginning of the demise.
No, I was going to reference that in my remarks. I just wanted to keep it to a certain time constraint.
You know, it was actually the beginning of the end of a dominant Maple Leafs franchise that has been so lackluster for the last 60 years. But in any event, it's of no moment to anybody but me and Eric. But I do have some discretion here, and I've chaired now about a half dozen meetings. And years ago, when I was a young law clerk, the judge I worked for, the brilliant and iconoclastic Stanley Sporkin, used to always say to me, when you start something new, keep your mouth shut and give it an appropriate period of time until you express your own views, because in most instances, you won't know what you're talking about until you've been there for a while. So I have tried to follow those words as best I could. But I'm now beginning to feel a little more comfortable. And as I review the board materials, I just want to note something and put everybody on notice that I think there are things that we can do better. Not that they're not being done well, but there's always room for improvement. And the reality is that, like any institution, you fall into certain patterns, and it sometimes takes a new set of eyes to question what something means. So in part a reflection of my own ignorance, and in part a reflection of my curiosity, and in part a reflection of my concern that when you cast a vote as a board member, it should mean something, and you should truly understand what you're voting on. And although all of you, I'm sure, do, being new to it, I've asked a lot of questions about what exactly I'm voting on. And like any other human endeavor, you end up realizing that people have adopted shorthand, there are codes, and that they sometimes get in the way of clarity that everybody wants to embrace. And so I just want to note that we've fallen into a habit of presenting oftentimes projects that conclude with the authorization of a general project plan, and then a vote on that general project plan, and typically an authorization and delegation, normally to the CEO and other executives, to release funds that are now come due under that general project plan within the discretion of those senior executives of ESD. But when you really drill down on it, in fact, the practice has been, and again, I don't think this started under this administration. My guess is, if we were really to do the analysis, it began under Hugh Carey. But what we're doing almost of necessity is projects are going forward, and we're then being authorized, once milestones have been met, to release the funds under those projects. And the moniker of General Project Plan, or GPP, ends up being misleading, because it's hard to call something a proposed plan when it's been in effect for 12 months or 48 months or 4 years or 5 years. Effectively, not that the board doesn't always retain discretion. The board can vote no, but as a practical matter, the board has already given the discretion to the staff to identify those projects, to approve those projects, and to proceed forward on those projects. So I just want to be clear, and I want folks who are presenting to understand that going forward, and we can do it, casually, but going forward, I think it's important to understand the history of a project, when a project began, what's gone on, a recognition that the staff adopted or authorized that project or monitoring it, that they are ensuring compliance, that we're now at a point where the certain milestones that require board action for the release of payments have been achieved, and that's what we're doing. And we can debate what a proposed general project plan means or doesn't mean, but in reality, it's whether it's a misnomer or simply of no moment, I don't think really matters. What I think does matter is that we as board members really focus on where we are, what we're doing in the life cycle of this project, and that the staff makes it clear to us why we are where we are, and that no one walks away thinking, oh, we're agreeing on this project from its inception. I think, as we all know, as you certainly all know, because you've served far longer than I have, we are not, except in some rare instances with respect to these projects, we're not authorizing them from inception. And by the way, nothing wrong with that. It would sort of be an odd way to proceed given the amount of work that has to be done, given the amount of monitoring. It's just not how it works. The other thing that I just wanted to point out is in many instances, and we'll get to this with the non-discretionary calendar as well, what is happening is that this agency is carrying out a policy decision or directive that comes from elsewhere. So it's not our staff that's deciding they want to do it, but rather whether it's a legislative directive or a directive from the governor's office, or in many instances, in the one place it is highlighted, when it's a decision by the regional economic development councils. I think it's important that as part of the presentations, we know where it originated. And then the final point I will make, and I've spoken exhaustively to Kevin Eunice, who is, one of the great resources and public servants that this agency has, about how it is these things get framed the way they are. I've learned a lot, frankly, in the last week from talking to him. But there are instances in which there is a cost-benefit analysis, or I think what we call a benefit cost analysis, which usually relates to job creation. And then some projects get approved without it, typically because there's a decision that it would be not possible to do a meaningful benefit cost analysis, but that the staff has concluded the long-term economic benefit of the project makes sense to approve. And I would just want to make sure that in presentations that often gets addressed, but going forward, I'm going to hold people harmless at this meeting, but going forward, I want to make sure that it is always addressed. If we don't have a benefit cost analysis, we should know why, and we should understand what the thinking is and what the analysis is that leads to a determination that there's a long-term economic benefit. And I will say that every one of these that I've drilled down on, it is absolutely persuasive. So I'm not suggesting there isn't a rationale or anybody's doing something wrong. I'm suggesting just the opposite, that because there is a rationale and because people are so knowledgeable about these subjects, that we should put it on the record one way or another. With that said, unless anybody wants to comment on my 4-minute editorial, I will turn it to Glendon.
Mr. Chair, Linda Lacewell, just a brief comment. Thank you for that fulsome statement. I think it's very well informed in terms of making sure that we're fulfilling our board responsibilities, right? Which is to have informed oversight. But I particularly appreciated your comment about our actions being meaningful. And I'm sure this will be an ongoing conversation past today. I often find that what we're being asked to vote on is to authorize the expenditure of funds as to which the obligation has already been incurred. And so I do understand that that's because of the way these things are structured. But as Steve said, I think sometimes it's useful to sort of do a rethink. We're fiduciaries, board service is very important. We want to do our job. We want to help the team. The team is doing a great job. I think it diminishes the board service if we're doing what could at best be called, ratification, at least without some sort of understanding of why this is meaningful. I'm sure that there would be, in some instances, a whole host of legal repercussions if we did not authorize the expenditure of funds that appear to have already been incurred, although I'm not giving any legal opinion here. Of course, that's not my function. So I'm interested to see how we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Appreciate it. And I agree. I mean, look, I think, and I said when I first took over that I really did want to start thinking through what the role of the board is. And I know that, again, we're living in a world that in all candor, none of us created. It's the nature of institutions. But I think it's good to sometimes take a step back and say, is there a better way to do things? And just because we've done it one way doesn't mean there isn't a better way. Or frankly, sometimes the analysis leads you to believe that the way we're doing it is actually, you can improve on it. And I welcome that dialogue, and I welcome the input from all of the commissioners. And I appreciate Kevin Eunice and Liz Fine's thoughts up till now, as well as Eric Ertler, who really is not just a master of this particular agency, but somebody who has served in so many different capacities in the business community that he really does have a kind of unique insight into what works and what doesn't with respect to board service.
Can I just add for the record that I agree 100% with your comments, Mr. Cohen. And I agree that board membership ought to mean something. And I'm prepared to participate fully, and I have in the past been disappointed in the way some of these projects have come before us. You may recall at one of the meetings, I was particularly concerned that there was no effort to describe the number of jobs that might flow from the particular approval of a grant. I think that is certainly very important to me. I suspect it's important to other board members. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Unless there are other comments, I think we turn to Glenn.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Cohen. Good morning to the directors. The directors will be requested to consider 9 projects totaling $25,058,189 in grants. The projects include 1 Buffalo Billion Award, 6 Regional Council Awards, and 3 discretionary awards. The projects will take place in the Capital, Central New York, Mohawk Valley, Western New York, Mid-Hudson, and Southern Tier regions, leverage over $90 million of additional investment, retain 466 jobs, and create 183 jobs in the state. Thank you.
Terrific. I think we go first to Mike Gavoli with 3 projects from the Capital Region. Mike, are you there?
I'm here. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. First up, I will be requesting the directors approve a $1,900,000 Round 5 CFA capital grant to the Albany Water Board for a portion of the costs associated with the construction of water and wastewater improvements in the city of Albany. The total project cost is $15,750,000. The project was a CREDC priority project. The Albany Municipal Finance Authority and the Albany Water Board were established by New York State legislation in 1986. The Water Board is a 5-member board charged with protecting and preserving Albany's waterworks and sewage collection system. The system serves over 100,000 people and employs approximately 140. The project included construction of new sewage pumping stations at the OGS Harriman office campus, construction of a new sewage force main to convey wastewater from the University of Albany and the Harriman campus to the Patroon Creek Sewer District, improvements to existing downstream receiving sewers, construction of new water tank at the Harriman campus, and the construction of a new water pumping station to create the new Upper Washington Ave pressure zone. So there's 2 parts of this project. There was a water and a wastewater project. Prior to this project, the wastewater from the University of Albany and the Harriman campus went to the Beaver Creek Sewer District and contributed to combined sewer overflows into the Hudson River. Now, this wastewater is conveyed to the Patroon Creek Sewer District and does not contribute to combined sewer overflows to the Hudson River. Future development on the Harriman and University of Albany campuses will not be restricted by requirements imposed on projects contributing to combined sewer flows going forward. The new $180 million University of Albany Emerging Technology and Entrepreneurship Complex campus benefited from this change. On the water side, prior to this project, water pressure in the upper Washington corridor was generally at the low end of the acceptable range. Now pressure is improved and more consistent. The new water tank results in reduced energy needs for supplying water to the University of Albany Harriman campus and improves pressure and capacity to the Pine Bush pressure zone. The Pine Bush pressure zone serves Albany Water Board's largest customer, SUNY Polytechnic, and serves the town of Guilderland residential and commercial customers along Washington Ave extension. So there was a consent order from there is an ongoing consent order from DEC that would restrict development without correcting these combined sewer overflows that occur along the Hudson River. So this was really needed to help facilitate future development in this corridor, which is obviously a growing corridor in the city of Albany. And Mr. Chairman, to address some of your concerns, the project's been underway since the incentive proposal was accepted in 2015 and has met the requirement of the accepted incentive proposal. The grantee is ready to proceed with the submission of the project cost documents as required for the disbursement of grant funding. Of course, pending this board approvals, completion of a public hearing, and approval of the Public Authorities Control Board. The project is consistent with the general project and plan included with the materials and is consistent with the CFA application submitted to the Regional Council. And as I mentioned, it was a priority project of that council. So that's where the project originated originally. I can just respond?
Yeah, let's pause for just a second. And again, I recognize that I'm putting a lot of people on the spot by sort of changing the way we're doing things and having maybe a little bit of a deeper inquiry. And this is one that, I don't want to dwell on too long because I think the benefits of this are obvious and the economic implications of it, as you set forth, are as close to self-evident as any. But this, I'll just take a moment and note, is a curious project because it does sound more like an infrastructure project that would be taken on by a locality and a municipality. But given the realities of the economic ecosystem that exists in that area, but for this getting done, obviously, you would have a real hardship in terms of the local economy. So it makes perfect sense. And I appreciate you giving us the quick update on the history. And let me also make another suggestion, which may drive Debbie crazy, and I apologize, which is let's not vote on the items as a group unless there's a real reason to do so. It'll take us a little bit more time, but I think it's worth the extra 6 minutes it's going to add to the board meeting. And if there are no questions on this one, which is item 2A on the agenda, I'd ask if there is a motion.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? 2A carries. Let's move to 2B.
So next, I would be requesting the directors to approve a total of $2,750,000 in CFA and Restore New York funding to the City of Albany on behalf of the Capitol Repertory Theater for a portion of the cost associated with the construction of the REP, facilitating the historic restoration and conversion of a vacant building into a theater with training and programming space in the City of Albany. The project was a CREDC Round 5 priority project. The total cost is $10,302,550. The two grants, as I mentioned, one being a CFA Round 5 grant was for $950,000. The Restore New York 5 grant was $1,800,000, totaling the $2,750,000. The REP is the region's only professional resident producing theater established in 1981. In addition to producing theater work, it also serves as an incubator for new theater content and provides educational experiencing by partnering with regional schools. They produce a year-round season of plays, musicals, and related programming, annually serving more than 45,000 people. The project was awarded $950,000 in funding through Round 5 of the CFA in December 2015, and originally involved a $4.8 million investment that included the acquisition and renovation of the Capitol Repertory Theater, which is located at North Pearl Street in the City of Albany. This is not where they are now. This was where they were originally located, and the original project was to purchase that facility and renovate it. After numerous unsuccessful attempts to acquire the facility, the reps sought out a new home so that they could continue to be a collaborative catalyst for revitalization and community impact. A decades vacant building 2 blocks away in Livingston Square was identified, but would be more costly to renovate. At the time anticipated $8.3 million. The City of Albany at that time applied to ESD for Restore New York Round 5 on behalf of the REP to address the additional funding gap. Subsequent to the award announcement, the CFA was transferred to the City of Albany so the 2 grants could be administered through a single contract. The REP recently completed the renovations of the 2-story, 33,000 square foot vacant industrial building. The renovations included clearing the building of lead and asbestos, restoring the building's facade to its historic character, and the transformational interior improvements that included a 300-seat theater, full-time cafe, box office, community event space, costume shop, scene shop, and administrative offices. And again, the grantee has met the program requirements, is ready to proceed with submission of the project cost documentation as required for the disbursement of grant funds, of course, pending this board approval, completion of the public hearing approval by the Public Authorities Control Board. The project is consistent with the general project plan included in the materials, and with the exception of the grantee and the project location as noted, is consistent with the CFA application.
So Mike, I have one, it's not even a question, it's a point of clarification. And I'm just going to ask you to look into it, confirm what I think is the case, and I'll state it in a second. And if in fact what I say is correct, great. If it's not correct, I'm going to ask you to let Liz Fine know, and we may have more questions at the next meeting. But there is on the REDC an individual by the name of Philip Morris who had a conflict here. I think he is involved with an arts group that has an affiliation with the Capitol Rep Theater, which is perfectly fine. The materials say he recused himself from the vote on this by the REDC. My assumption is that he recused himself from all aspects of the consideration and deliberation. By the way, I'm not so sure it would be a problem if he in fact did participate in presenting and making an argument on behalf of the theater. But if that were to be the case, I would want the record to reflect that his recusal was only as to the vote. I'm assuming you may, but I'm assuming you don't off the top of your head know what the answer to that question is. And I'd ask that you look into it. And assuming that he didn't participate at all, that's great. Assuming he did, then I'd want to get it clarified on the record and let the board know.
Sure. No, and I can, for the record, we have, of course, the actual recusal submitted by Philip Morris. That's part of our record. We have a full record of all recusals for all CFA applications that we distribute from round 1.
Here's the trick in life, though, and I can tell you this from the unfortunate reality of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. I will note before my tenure on that board, there was a process in which one of the commissioners, by the way, it was not a New York commissioner, recused himself from all sorts of votes. But what wasn't disclosed, that he was advocating behind the scenes, and he was advocating to both the staff and the commissioners. And he then would recuse himself from the votes, and the record said he had recused himself from the vote. And again, I've looked at the materials that are in the record that were presented to the board. It's not clear to me how extensive that recusal was. And again, I'm not suggesting there's a problem either way. I'm just saying, having noted that there is an issue here, I think we should get it cleared up. And again, if you know that he didn't participate, great. But if you don't know, please pull it out.
Yeah. No, so if I could just take a minute too. So what we do is the recusal happens there. The application then would not be distributed to them, nor any of the materials related to the application review process from the council members would be distributed to them. Our council, all councils, I think, review projects differently. After 2 council members, which I think everybody does, after 2 council members review and score each project, we assemble that information and then get together with the full council to review all of the projects and the scores from the 2 members who did that. When we do that meeting, it's a marathon meeting. When we do that meeting, if you are conflicted or have recused yourself from the project, you have to leave the room. We also, it's their obligation to not violate their own code of ethics by not lobbying for a project they are conflicted on. So we asked them that, and they attest to that. I knew this might come up today. I did talk to Philip Morris, and he did attest that he did not. One point of clarification. we do, as far as ESD staff and underwriting these projects and reviewing them, have to have that conversation with folks involved in the project. In this particular case, it's not just that he's a board member, he's the actual principal involved with the organization. So staff certainly had conversations.
Here's the problem, Mike. I'll cut to it. And look,
Yeah.
the problem is you get to a certain point in your life where you get old, and I'm at that point. And when you get old, you get tired and you get lazy and you suffer from having too much experience. And I imagine that I'm probably the oldest person on this board. The comfort and safety of a board member is the record. And so I hear everything you're saying, but it's not in the record. And by the way, it's now on the record, so it's fine. But going forward, let's put this stuff on the record, either in a presentation or put it in the materials, so that if ever there is an issue and somebody were to say to me, and again, you know, I ascribe to the Abraham Lincoln view of altruism, which if people are not familiar with, I encourage you to look up. It's a form of selfishness. I like me a lot, and I want to keep me out of trouble. I learned that from Linda Lacewell, by the way. And so as a board member, my security and my safety is that it's on the record somewhere. Because if I have to say, well, I relied upon the staff, but it's not on the record, shame on me. So again, I'm not criticizing anybody. I just think it's important that this stuff ends up in the record. And having read the exhaustive record with respect to this item, I know that there's a reference to a recusal, but what you've just told us isn't in there. And you know, as a general rule in life, again, because I'm lazy, I don't like to be in a position where if there's ever an issue that we've got to engage in an active archaeology. So going forward, it would be great. And unless there are any other questions, I'm ready to move
Hey,
to vote.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question, Linda
Yes.
Lacewell. Could you tell us, in terms of time, how this project fit in with the advent of the pandemic? And given that it is a theater, is there any thought being given with respect to the project plans or adjustments to sort of not assume that we're going to need down the road, right, in these mass venue scenarios to deal with the need for distanced audiences and so on and so forth?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the project was under construction during the beginning of the pandemic. The project was not an essential project and was actually halted for a period of time until non-essential construction was allowed, and then they resumed construction activities and was completed a little off schedule based on that, but not much what they anticipated. As it relates to programming, in my conversations with them, you know, they are, of course, you know, I mean, just for full disclosure, they're part of a large lobbying efforts of upstate not-for-profit facilities that are looking for money to get them started, and they feel that they have without some assistance, a three-year or longer process to get back up to what their normal operations would be, given the way productions are done and then distributed across venues, right? A lot of venues do come from Broadway or off Broadway. That specifically for this facility, a lot of the programming comes from that, or is derived here and produced here initially. So, you know, they anticipate, of course, having to be, I guess, crafty and what they're going to be doing programmatically here, but they feel that they're going to be able to open up as been described recently with New York Forward and operate and begin producing activities for the community.
And Linda, thank you for that question. I just also wanted to add that on a macro level, when we think about the role of ESD and we think about the strategy of what we're doing, one of the critical pillars of our investment strategy is placemaking, which really goes to our role in creating vibrant, livable communities. And we know that the arts have always been critical to ensuring that we've got vibrant, livable communities that go hand in hand with the economic development that we're creating. Here, of course, as you rightly point out, there's the intersection of ensuring that we're putting in the proper health guidelines while at the same time looking to open the economy. So, in those cases, as the governor opens up those restrictions and allows it more and more, these facilities will continue to grow. But ever important that we continue to think about and invest in our core pillars. So, I just
Yes,
wanted to add
thank
that.
you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think what I'm trying to articulate is where we are essentially investing, right, in a new venue. The venue's chances of success, while also being responsible, right, may well be affected by sort of ongoing pandemic issues or, heaven forbid, any in the future. And so we're supposed to be building back better, right? Not just closing the projects that we had the way they were. And I'm sort of looking for potentially a little bit more expansive thinking about, all right, well, here's a project, it's important, it's a placemaker for that community, 1,000 reasons why it's a good thing. How do we help that venue, either by partnering appropriately, whether it's OH or are we giving technical grants, or did we encourage them to look at, if it was not too late, what the design was and how they could maximize the flexibility? Is it fixed 300 seats, or are they removable seats so that if they need to go distanced? I'm just making this up. This is not what I do, right? Yeah. I'm good at asking questions. I don't necessarily have the answers. And I just wanted to flag that as something that I thought for a theater could be significant. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mike, anything else to add?
No, I mean, we could certainly follow up with that. I do think this particular facility is very much standardized based on the union and where the productions are coming from, and I think 300 seats is the minimum.
Eric. Eric and I have been to kind of hell and back in a sidecar with the live entertainment industry as a result of what you just pointed out, Linda, which is the COVID crisis. And I think we all agree that the significance and importance of live entertainment and creating a sense of place. And I wonder, Eric, if it wouldn't make sense to ask some of the folks who were involved in whether it was New York Pop-Ups or some of the other projects we worked on and the folks from NISCA to maybe in the next month or two actually do a presentation to the board to explain how that overlaps with your vision of ESD and the notion of creating place and community.
Great. I think that'd be a great presentation, and Debbie will add that to the list, and we'll come back and discuss so that we ensure that we can provide the board with a sense of the intersection of arts and economic development, and some of the initiatives that we have put forth over the last number of months. So, thank you, Steve.
If there are no other questions, I think we can move to 2B, and I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing no objections, and there being no objections, the motion carries. Mike, we're moving at a snail's pace, but it's an enjoyable snail's pace. I think we move on to Robinson Block Capital.
Thank you. Finally, I will be requesting the directors to approve a $1.2 million capital grant to Schenectady Metroplex Development Authority on behalf of Highbridge Prime Development, Inc. for a portion of the commercial construction costs associated with the demolition of buildings, site preparation, construction of mixed-use development, including the construction of commercial space, market rate apartments, and parking in the city of Schenectady. The project was a CREDC Round 4 priority project. The total project cost is $20,169,977. Schenectady Metroplex Development Authority is an economic development public benefit corporation formed by the state of New York in August 1998 and is tasked with designing, planning, and financing, constructing and administrating, operating and managing, and maintaining facilities within Schenectady County. Highbridge Prime Development, the development company, is a combination of two highly reputable development companies in the Capital District, Highbridge Development of Schenectady and Prime Companies of Cohoes, the largest market rate apartment developer in the region. The Robertson Block redevelopment represents a 4-story, 140,000 square foot mixed-use facility containing 105 market rate apartments with dedicated parking for 120 vehicles and 9,100 square feet of ground floor commercial space. The development company secured site control of the 7 properties that were vacant, blighted, or otherwise underutilized. All of the buildings were demolished and the parcels were converted into one, 240 State Street. The project was completed in June 2019 and leasing is nearly complete. And again, the project has been underway since the incentive proposal was accepted in 2016 and has met the requirements of the accepted incentive proposal. The grantee is ready to proceed with submission of the project documentation and that is required for disbursement of the grant funds pending this board's approval and completion of the hearing and approval of the PACB. The project is consistent with the general project plan included in the materials and is consistent with the CFA application.
Any questions? By the way, I'll just note that I did find the supporting documentation in this, compelling to the point of making this very easy.
Thank you.
Any questions? If there are none, I'll ask if there's a motion.
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Hearing no objection, the motion carries. And Mike, thank you. I appreciate that, being first when things have altered slightly is never easy, and appreciate your indulgence and your insights. So
thank you.
You're great.
Same here. It's good to know what you're looking for. We can definitely make it happen. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think I speak up for the entire board when I say it is greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Jim Fail, are you up?
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
Very good. I think you have one item for us today, right?
I do. So the board will be asked to approve a $600,000 grant for Cryomech Inc. They are a manufacturer of equipment used in the cryogenic refrigeration sector. This is a total project of about $18 million. They signed our incentive proposal in July of 2019, began the project in the fall of 2019, and completed it in September of 2020. Due to timing issues, this project was done outside the traditional CFA process. However, our executive committee of the regional council signed off on it, and the regional council has been aware of it. There's been no conflicts with any of the regional council members on this project. This project also will be creating 19 new jobs, of which 9 have already been hired. This was they have also met the first 2 criteria in order to receive reimbursement. They've completed the project and hired half of the employees that they were going to hire. And this was a 76,000 square foot new manufacturing facility, which allows them to expand their operations. And they've also allowed additional expansion if needed in the future for up to 34,000 square feet.
So on this one, and there's no need to answer, it's my understanding that there is a definition in the benefit cost analysis related to permanent full-time positions. And I've noticed that there are instances, and again, a situation that I've discussed, thankfully, with the ever helpful Kevin Eunice. There sometimes are variations in what the definition is of a permanent full-time position. They vary project to project. Oftentimes they're the subject of negotiations, and sometimes they are they're altered because of other contingencies and needs, including the economic circumstances of the community in which the job is being created. This instance, if I'm not mistaken, and Kevin can jump in if I've got it wrong, the definition here is the standard definition that exists, call it 80 to 90% of the time. So I don't think there's a reason to dwell on it. But I will note that it probably going forward, it's worth pointing out when that definition deviates from the norm. But unless, Jim, I'm missing something here, I don't think we have that here. And unless there are questions, I'm ready to move this for a vote.
You're correct with that.
Terrific. Can I ask for a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposition? The motion carries. I will note that as we were aware before of this, one of our commissioners, because of a commitment, had to leave. So to the extent anybody is watching or cares, it's not as if Hilda is abstaining. It's just she's not present. So just so the record reflects that. We now move to Allison Nowak. I believe, Allison, you have 2 items from the Mohawk Valley region.
I do. Good morning.
Good morning.
The directors are being asked to approve a grant of up to $500,000 from the Regional Council Capital Fund for Trenton Technology Incorporated to be used for a portion of the cost of the purchase of machinery and equipment to add a surface mount assembly line incorporating the latest advances in technology. Trenton Technology Incorporated was established in 1979 in the city of Utica as a full-service custom manufacturer of printed circuit assemblies. With in-house design, engineering, and support teams, the company is able to maintain control to ensure dependable delivery of computer hardware components throughout the world. Trenton Technology's primary markets include military and aerospace, government, medical, industrial, automation, and security. Trenton Technology has made a major capital investment in the acquisition and installation of new state-of-the-art automated surface mount assembly line, which is the 4th such in their facility, and added a highly specialized HVAC system. The company retained 213 existing jobs and created 34 new jobs with this expansion. They pledged 10 new jobs and actually created 34. The total budget for this project was $4,383,282. Our CFA grant was 11.4% of the total project cost, and the total project was completed in January of 2021. And it's consistent with the MVRADC's plan to promote the creation of advanced manufacturing jobs and expand high technology manufacturing within the region. Happy to answer any questions on that one.
Any questions? And this is a project, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is a benefit cost analysis with respect to this project?
There is, yep. There was a BCA run. The max grant award for this was listed as just over $900,000, and the grant was determined to be $500,000.
Right. And any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion on what I think we're up to is 2E on the agenda.
I move we approve it.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. We are on to 2F, and we're still with Allison.
Yes. The second project the directors are being asked to approve is a Round 8 Regional Council capital grant of $1.25 million to be used as a portion of the cost of construction of a mixed-use development consisting of ground floor commercial space and upper floor market rate apartments. Griffith's Local Development Corporation promotes, facilitates, and oversees the redevelopment of the former Griffiths Air Force Base in Rome, New York, now called Griffith Business and Technology Park. Griffith Business and Technology Park is now home to 72 businesses with approximately 6,000 employees. Griffiths Local Development Corporation was awarded $1.25 million in Round 8 of the CFA to advance an incentive for the B240 site mixed-use redevelopment. The The B240 site is a former brownfield infill site that has been vacant since 1997 and is located within close range of several high-tech cybersecurity firms in the Air Force Research Laboratory that have all cited the need for high-quality market-rate housing located in close proximity to be able to attract and retain their workforce. Griffiths Local Development Corporation issued an RFP for development of the site and it was awarded to Bonaccio Construction in January of 2019. The developer, Bonaccio Construction, undertook construction of buildings 1A and 1B, totaling 84 market-rate apartments and 29,000 square feet of commercial space in August of 2019. Building 1A was completed in November 2020, and leasing is underway. And actually, leasing for 1A and 1B, 1B will be completed at the end of this month, is 83% leased at this time. Let's see here. And the total budget for the project is $21 million for construction and renovation. ESD's participation in the project is 6% of the total project cost at $1.25 million. And the project is consistent with the MVREDC strategy to attract and retain high-tech workforce to grow and enhance our cybersecurity cluster. And I'll be happy to answer any questions on that one.
Terrific. Any questions? I would ask for a motion then with respect to 2F.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposition. The motion carries. And I will just say thank you, Allison. You sort of hit all the markers that I care about, and it's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
We now move on to Amanda, I believe. Amanda Mays, are you there on a project for the Buffalo region? I think you only have one.
Yes, good morning.
All yours.
Okay, great. For this project, the directors are requested to approve a $15 million capital grant from the Buffalo Regional Innovation Cluster Fund, Buffalo Billion 2, to ESD's subsidiary, Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, for a portion of costs associated with beginning implementation of its Outer Harbor Plan. The plan was approved by the ECHTC Board of Directors in February 2021. It will be implemented in phases with completion over a 20-year span. Funding provided by ESD will be used for the initial $44 million first phase, with additional funding coming from ECHTC's relicensing agreement with NYPA and from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The Buffalo Billion 2 plan, which was released in January of 2017, included an allocation for the Outer Harbor, and the project has now gone through planning and design, bringing it to a time when it is ready for presentation. ECHDC has co-sponsored or prepared several plans which embody the goals and objectives for the project, including the September 2015 Buffalo Outer Harbor Blueprint, the September 2016 Buffalo Harbor Brownfield Opportunity Area Nomination Document, and the June 2019 Buffalo Outer Harbor Preferred Plan. These planning documents were the subject of an extensive community participation process that began in early 2012 and resulted in updating the Outer Harbor zoning as part of the City of Buffalo's larger Unified Zoning Ordinance, or better known as the Green Code, in 2016, and in the development of this Outer Harbor General Project Plan. In August of 2019, the ECHDC directors approved entering into 3 design contracts for various portions of the Buffalo Outer Harbor to continue the development of open space and recreation amenities begun during the implementation of the first Buffalo Billion in 2015 that resulted in the creation of the Buffalo Harbor State Park and some lighter, quicker, cheaper improvements. The results of the design efforts were first presented to the ECHDC directors in November of 2019 as a general project plan for implementation. The GPP was subsequently revised following a public comment period to acknowledge existing zoning codes, incorporate a myriad of program and activity opportunities, specifically spaces for cultural arts, and removing reference to the possibility of future development at First Buffalo River Marina, which was not met favorably by the community. Construction will begin in fall of 2021 as the work will begin in bringing in clean fill due to the site being former industrial land. The fill needs several months to settle, and this will ensure it has the winter months to do so. The project will include landscaping improvements at Wilkeson Point, a reorganized entrance, comfort station, targeted landscaping and trail improvements at the Bell Slip, creation of an aquatic habitat in former Slip 3, rehabilitation and adaptive reuse of the Terminal B building to create restrooms, operations and maintenance offices, and infrastructure and utilities for large-scale events, and landscaping and hardscaping enhancements, bike park plaza enhancements, and trail extensions at the Lakeside Complex at the Buffalo Outer Harbor. These projects will create and enhance open spaces, increase land and water access, increase passive and active recreational amenities, and make improvements on more than 50 acres of upland and watered property. Improvements will transform the nearly vacant and underutilized project locations into vibrant three-season setting for family-oriented uses, including health and wellness, cultural, recreational, entertainment, and commercial uses. The project will continue enhancing Buffalo's waterfront, returning former brownfield and industrial land to productive and attractive use, and bringing new visitors to the waterfront. And I have the president of ECHTC, Steve Vernelli, on the line with me as well to answer any questions.
I have, first of all, and Liz, fine, I assume you're there as well in case you want to weigh in. My understanding is ECHDC is a subsidiary of ESD. Is that how the corporate structure works?
Yes.
And so, I mean, this is sort of an interesting situation. We don't have to dwell on it, but our sub has essentially approved something. And so it's rolling up to us. I think we have an obligation as independent fiduciaries to consider it. But I think the deference, just from the standpoint of a corporate governance standpoint, there should be some deference afforded to the sub. I'm saying that just so it's clear. I think this is an essential project as part of the overall Buffalo Outer Harbor project. The one question I do have, or the one clarification, and you alluded to it quickly, is that within the materials there's a reference to the staff has overcome negative testimony from the local hearing, and you referenced it very quickly. But could you just spend 30 seconds to a minute explaining what that negative testimony was and why you are comfortable proceeding despite the negative testimony?
Sure, and I'll ask Steve, just because you were, you heard the comments and you renovated revised the plan accordingly.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Amanda. Hi, it's Steve Vernelli. I'm president of the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation.
Delighted to have you with us, and next time if we know you're coming, we're going to make you do a presentation on what you're doing up there, and we're going to follow up with you to make sure that happens.
Oh, I'd be really excited to. We've had a lot of success here in Buffalo over the last decade or two, and we would love to share that with the board.
Right.
To answer your question, and I think this just goes to the larger process that Amanda laid out, in the fact that this GPP is really the culmination of 6 years of planning, community engagement, coordination with the city and other entities. There were open houses and stakeholder meetings, online surveys, where we had over 1,500 people participate in this process. We received over 2,000 comments throughout these 6 years. And so, throughout that entire process, the project shifted from something that was much more urban in nature at the beginning of that process to something that is open space now, and even zoned that way, if you will. Again, Amanda mentioned that some of those early studies we did resulted in us in the city agreeing on the rezoning of the property to open space. So the overall process itself was sort of aligning the vision of the corporation with the community, and I think we're there. Ultimately, in this GPP process, though, and going through comments, there were 3 modifications that we felt were necessary between adopting and then affirming. The first one was actually a mistake in the document. We had the wrong listing for the zoning, and so we corrected that. The second one was that there was a push for the addition of cultural arts to be added to our discussion on site-wide elements. So we did that. We do a lot of programming on site, and they wanted to be clear to include the cultural arts in that. And then the final comment was related to the First Buffalo River Marina property. That is currently zoned by the city to allow for residential, employment, lodging, or retail as uses on that site. However, we still have been receiving a significant amount of comment from the public. And so we removed any reference to those type of principal uses within this general project plan.
Terrific. So to be clear, although the record says the staff has overcome the negative testimony. In fact, you took into account the negative testimony, altered your plans to reflect it, and came up with a path that that resolved those lingering issues. It sounds like.
That's correct.
Terrific. Any further questions? Well, then I guess we move to a vote, and I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second? I hear a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion carries. And thank you both. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Steve, for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
James Constenblatt, are you available to discuss with us Cafe Spice?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
You may proceed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, directors. The directors today are being asked to approve a capital grant to Cafe Spice of up to $1,473,000 for a portion of the costs associated with equipment upgrades in their existing facility in the town of New Windsor in Orange County, and also for expansion into a second location in the city of Beacon in Dutchess County, right across the river. The total investment for this project is $9,140,000. Cafe Spice is a food manufacturing business founded in 2000. The company has grown to become a $25 million revenue enterprise and one of the country's leading manufacturers of high quality prepared foods. You may have even seen their packaging in a grocery store near you. In addition to manufacturing, the company is a leading consumer packaged goods brand, so they do co-packing in the fast-growing ethnic cuisine category. Upgrades in the New Windsor facility began in 2018, shortly after the company accepted their incentive proposal from Empire State Development, which was in late 2017. And construction in Beacon began in 2020 and is expected to be complete by September 2021. I believe that you'll find some images of the Beacon facility under construction in the board materials that were included today. The company has committed to creating 154 new full-time equivalent positions and retaining 130, so more than doubling their workforce. To date, the company has created 42 of those new positions. The state incentives actually induced Cafe Spice to stay and expand in New York State instead of moving production out of state. At this point, the company has met the first milestone for disbursement of their capital grant, pending this board approval, a public hearing, and approval from the Public Authorities Control Board. The project invests in the growth of the food and beverage supply chain in the Mid-Hudson region, an incredibly important part of our economy. The project was originated in the Mid-Hudson Regional Office, presented to and approved by Empire State Development's Project Review Committee back in 2017. And the general project plan, which is in your materials today, is an accurate representation of the project. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just it's a point of personal curiosity. How big is their co-packing facility? And is there any thought about encouraging the expansion of that? I have been involved over the last 8 years or so with a consumer products company. And one of the things that happened, and I've seen this with some of our competitors, is that they have moved to co-packing, have given up their own facilities. And in one instance, which was a competitor, they left New York State. And I just wonder if there's a broader opportunity. I'm not going to waste everybody's time, but James, if you think there is, maybe it's something we can talk about.
Yeah, I think there is. It's one of the areas that they're seeing a lot of growth in. They're very, very proud of it. And they, as I mentioned, they are a leading brand in this. I'm not sure how much of the about 70,000 square foot facility in Beacon is committed to co-packing. I know also a portion of the New Windsor facility, but I can look into that.
Yeah, and just, I mean, for reference, it was widely reported on a few years ago. For years, Cumberland Packing in Brooklyn did all their packing of Sweet and Low and their related projects in Brooklyn, and sort of made a heroic effort to stay, and ultimately, in part because it was across from the Navy Yard and the real estate prices really dictated that it was a silly place to have a packing facility. They up and left. And I just wonder, looking back on it, that's an opportunity that, none of us were in these jobs then, but, if there was an opportunity lost there that perhaps we can look into and learn from.
Yeah, and the Mid-Hudson, we have space for that, exactly that kind of thing. We'd be happy to be part of that conversation.
Great. Any other questions, comments, concerns, observations, witticisms, or hockey trivia? Hearing none, I will call for a motion. I think we have one from Cesar. Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion carries. And I think we now move, if I'm reading this agenda correctly, to Kelly, who is going to talk to us about Market New York grants, and in particular, what we all want to be doing right now, which is glamping in Watkins Glen.
Yes, good morning. Market New York has one capital project awarded in round 8, which was in December of 2018 of the RADC awards, and was consistent with the region's strategic plan and was identified as a priority project by the region. A capital grant of $385,189 has been awarded to April Ventures LLC. This privately owned limited liability company located in the Southern Tier region will be reimbursed awarded funds for their project to construct a glamping facility. Glamping, for those of you who may not be familiar, is a form of camping that has gained international popularity thanks to luxury accommodations and amenities that can include chef-cooked communal meals and fully furnished safari tents with comfortable beds and their own private porches. This outdoor resort experience is located just down from Gate 2 of the Watkins Glen International Speedway. The project specifically included the creation of 31 platform tents and luxury bathing facilities, exactly the type of creature comforts expected with this travel segment. The overall experience presents a high-end introduction to the Watkins Glen area, as well as the greater Southern Tier region. This project is set to be completed this May, and pre-booking of the impeccable accommodations is set to begin in June for this summer. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you can help me understand, by the way, Eric and I have been talking a lot about when we get a break and the COVID issues resolve ourselves, we're going to go glamping together. And probably we'll go up to Watkins Glen. And I invite any other board member who wants to join us for our luxury glamping experience to come along. If I'm not mistaken, this is one of the projects that does not have a benefit cost analysis. And I think that there's the notion, which is almost on its face obvious, that there is a long-term benefit. It also fits into a broader objective with respect to Marketing New York. But I was wondering if you could just take a little bit of time to explain the circumstances that lead to these kind of projects moving forward without that kind of analysis. Or maybe Kevin can jump in, because I know we spoke about this and I think it's just helpful for everybody to be on the same page.
Hey, yeah, it's Kevin. I'll jump in here. Thanks. So with certain projects, historically, we found that our benefit cost analysis tends to be very focused on the jobs and the direct investment, but the strategies of the this organization and the administration also focus on things like downtown development, things like encouraging visitation. So those are, as it relates to investments that are important to help foster the environment that will encourage that activity, will bring back the downtowns of upstate New York. We think they're important to do, but they don't necessarily lend themselves to what you would think of as the benefit cost analysis, numbers in, numbers out kind of assessment. Nevertheless, we find them important. And I think to your earlier point, Steve, and as discussed, I think we can do a better job focusing, maybe explicitly setting aside a section, for example, of explaining what those broader benefits are in the instances where we don't have an explicit BCA done.
Yeah, that would be great. And look, Eric has done a phenomenal job, both individually and to the board, of explaining the overall objectives, policies, and approaches of ESD. But what I think would be nice is to connect up some of these projects to that overall strategy, which we can start to do in the future. But this is a great example of it, which is on its face. I understand the metrics are probably hard to pin down in terms of short term, even in terms of job creation. But overall, it's a piece of a broader economic puzzle. And to the extent we think about economies these days as really being economic ecosystems, this is a piece of that puzzle. So with that rambling understanding, I will ask if anybody has any questions, and if not, I'll ask for a motion.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion carries, and I think it is now safe for us all to go glamping in Watkins Glen, provided we follow the important health guidelines that have been issued by the Department of Health. I think that completes the project calendar. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Kevin. And now I think we move to Simone, who is going to explain what's on the non-discretionary consent calendar. And once again, I would be remiss if I didn't pause, given that I am trying to really transition these board meetings into something a little different, and note that one of the great conundrums I have faced since joining this august institution is the hyphenated word, non-discretionary, followed by the word consent, which one might argue is an oxymoron. And so I, of course, inquired as to if it's non-discretionary, then what is there to consent to? And as I understand it, and again, Kevin and Liz can jump in and save me from myself if needed, is that it's non-discretionary in the sense that these are projects that have been more or less directed or dictated by others outside the agency. So while we don't have to approve it, we have discretion to say, nice try, doesn't work. We don't think it is within the mission of the agency. If we are going to improve it, we are going to approve it as put forward. So to that extent, it is non-discretionary. And if I've got that wrong, Kevin, save me from myself.
No, that's right, Steve. As an agency, an organization with certain powers, we're often tasked with doing things. Sometimes those items may be explicitly lined out in a budget. So you, in that case, as you said, the board could say, no, we don't think this is something we will approve the funding for. But we don't have the ability to change the nature of the work. So we are tasked oftentimes, particularly because we're unique in our fiscal and project management capacity. We are often tasked with administering certain programs on behalf of the administration and with from the legislature.
So, and again, no need to reach a conclusion on this today, but the one thing I would propose and would love to hear from the commissioners on this, and Eric on this, and those who aren't present today as well, who have, again, a wealth of experience, it sort of begs the question, the agency is really acting as the steward of the project. To the extent we would ever say no, it's because it either falls outside the mission or scope of ESD, or there is something so fatally flawed. And I wonder, and again, we're not going to do it today, but I wonder if we shouldn't just grant blanket discretion to the staff to approve and administer these, and that these shouldn't come to the board. But again, I don't want to reach a conclusion. I'm really putting it out there as an open question as to whether or not we should consider, assuming legally we can, in that fashion. So with that said,
sure we can. Let's look into that. So I would just say, obviously, we would never, as the folks that work on your behalf in this organization, ever bring you something and ask you to support it where we thought it was so egregiously inappropriate for you to approve.
Right, but Kevin, it's a different issue, right? Which is it's a point that Cesar has made repeatedly in the past, which is exactly what you said is why you should have discretion. Because, and again, I'm arguing the position, but I truly am open to this. But the argument is that if there's a problem here, the staff isn't going to approve it, that there's no value gained from any kind of input, insight, or oversight by a board on these kind of projects. They don't have to hew to the vision of the agency. And there really is nothing for us to do other than to say yes, because if you're bringing them to us, we're approving them. And so you start to feel at that point as if you're a rubber stamp. And again, for my expenditure of time, energy, and brain power, to the extent any of this involves that, it's almost as if there's really no need, if we are legally entitled, to simply tell the staff, look, these are what they are. You should consider them, and if there's a problem, we can discuss them. But short of that, I don't know why we as a board are voting.
It's a fair point. It's a fair point. I appreciate your perspective, and let's look into it.
Great.
Yeah, is there a legal requirement that we as a board approve them, or is it something we can delegate, or must we ourselves do it?
That's the question. I think
I think we should take a look at that. It's Liz Fine here. And, I would think of these as by request of. These are by request of, either through an appropriation by the legislature or by request. So it's like a by request introduction of legislation. The reason they're coming to the board is because they are over the threshold of that the board has delegated to the staff. But we can come back to the board with some thoughts about whether you can carve out a specific category of projects like these by request of projects, and have the board delegate that authority to the staff.
And it's Linda Lacewell here. Even if we did that, of course, I think we would probably like to be briefed and kept informed, right?
Sure.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Look, what has sort of, it should be obvious. What got my attention was the concept of non-discretionary, which leads you to question, as a board member, what is your role and how do you acquit your fiduciary responsibilities? And it seems to me these are different in nature than even when the REDC is coming with something where we really do have a greater role. Whether we have been exercising that role or not, we can debate, but we do have a role. So with that said, in a heck of an introduction for Simone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to everyone. For the first item, we're seeking board approval for one assembly-sponsored non-discretionary grant of up to $550,000 to the Bronx Overall Economic Development Center, or BOEDC. The BOEDC enhances the quality of life in the Bronx by strengthening businesses and creating innovative economic, housing, educational, and career development programs for youth and adults. The BOEDC will use these funds to finance the administrative and operational expenses of its economic development and tourism programs. In particular, it will operate the formal loan program, which was set up to provide recovery financing to businesses of the Bronx in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, the workforce development program, in which BOEDC partners with the New York State Department of Labor by providing office space and related services to four of their staff members, and the tourism program, in which BOEDC supports tourism in the borough through its subsidiary, the Bronx Tourism Council. This funding will cover the operation of these programs, which will run through December 2021. The grantee is ready to initiate these programs and has met the required milestones to be eligible to seek board approval. And I can answer any questions.
Any questions on this item?
Yes, it's Linda Lacewell. Could you clarify for me, what does it mean, assembly? How did that manifest itself? Is this a line item?
Yes, it was sponsored by an assembly member. They would, their office would interface with the grantee and would allot funds, which would be administered by ESD. So it's sponsored by a particular assembly member.
But the funds come from where?
Linda, it's Kevin, if I can jump
in.
So I don't know this one. There tends to be two forms that type of item could be presented to us. Sometimes you might see it lined out in the budget, $500,000, $550,000 for the Bronx overall economic development. Other times, and I think this is these are less frequent at this point because there are maybe a pot of funding that the legislature, at its discretion, allocates.
Well, Linda, it's what we used to call a member item.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So then we receive a letter maybe from the legislature saying for out of this pot, and again, I don't remember this specific one, I'd have to look at it, whether it's out of the pot or whether it's lined out of the budget. So, but in either case, it would have been, we would get a letter from the assembly saying this is the project I'm asking you to support for this amount. And then we would do what we have to do to make sure it's done appropriately within the, within the guidance and the framework within which we operate, and generally consistent with the wishes of the party making the request.
Including managing potential conflicts of the assembly
With
person?
regard to the members, yes, I know there is I think that the sunlight, I think is what, again, I would want to.
This is Glendon McCleary. As a part of the process, once we get that initiative letter that Kevin just described, an application is sent to the grantee, and they're required to make certain attestations, certifications as a part of that application that there's been no conflict of interest and things of that nature. So yes, we do that as a part of due diligence with the application.
Any other questions? In which case we'll move to vote on item 3A on the non-discretionary consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained?
Linda Lacewell, I'm going to abstain on this one. Thank you.
Okay, the motion carries. The motion carries unless I'm missing the numbers. We move to the next one. Capital Assistance Program for Technology.
Okay, second item is a $400,000 Senate-sponsored grant to Sportsfield Specialties, Inc., a sports equipment and sporting venue construction company, for construction of a 59,500 square foot addition to the south side of its current facility located in Delhi, New York, in the southern tier. This $8 million expansion project, which commenced in December 2018, also included a Regional Council Round 8 award of $500,000, which was approved in May 21st, 2020, for the first phase of the project. The company also purchased and installed new metal fabrication equipment. Thanks to ESD's assistance, the project was complete in February 2020, and the company was able to retain 103 existing jobs and create 20 new jobs. The project is complete, and the grantee has met the required milestones to be eligible to seek board approval. And I can take any questions.
Yeah, it's Linda Lacewell. Whether the board continues to vote on these or not, I personally, given the history of related categories of grants, I'm going to ask for a little bit more information about the origin. Was it a budget line item? What fund is it coming from? And at least some upfront description of the conflict of interest management process. So, Mr. Chair, I'll just be abstaining on this one also.
Let me ask you a question. Is there any harm in putting this over till the next meeting? Is there any urgency here?
The project is complete. I'm not sure. I think it would be okay.
What about the prior one, the Bronx overall EDC working capital? Would there be any harm in putting that over so that the commissioners' questions can be answered?
No.
No concern there?
No.
So can I make a suggestion, which is that we withdraw the prior vote, and Eric, if we're missing something here, or Kevin, if we're missing something here, or Liz, if we're missing something, speak up.
No, I think, I don't, obviously without checking in with the project folks specifically, I wouldn't know whether there would be any harm caused, but my guess is, my speculation is that it's something we can put off, and if it's get you the answers that you're looking for, and if appropriate, bring it back next month.
So my suggestion, subject to an objection from any of the commissioners, is that we put them over, and that we put them on the agenda for the May meeting, and that at that time we satisfy the questions appropriately and I think wisely asked by the superintendent, which is, what is the source of the funding? Who is the sponsor of this? Confirm that there have been the appropriate conflict checks, as well as understand who's going to administer these. Any objection?
I'm fine with that, Steve.
Okay, so let's do that. And again, thank you, Simone.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need a motion to take back our approval of the first item?
I'm a belts and suspenders kind of guy, so let's I'll ask for a motion on that very proposition. Do I hear a motion?
I so move.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Linda, you don't get to vote on this because you abstained.
I was going to say that.
Thank you, Linda. We now have the unusual experience of the DPP, the double Pravina presentation. She's back. Pravina, are you back with us?
I am back. I've been on the entire time, so I'm here.
This was designed to make you listen to the whole board meeting.
I appreciate it. It's been very educational. So I'm presenting the next item, and after I present, I'd just like to give an overview of the venture program, because the next two programs you will be hearing about are different from what you just heard about, the non-discretionary spending and the normal projects. These do not have job requirements as we normally see in projects, so I just wanted to give an overview to address your concerns in some of the material and what we've been doing. This, just so everyone knows, is the CDFI Assistance Program, and CDFI stands for Community Development Financial Institutions. This is an annual appropriation through the Aid to Localities budget that we receive $1.495 million. This is to provide provide grants of up to $80,000 to the selected CDFIs. We go through a request for application process. We had 23 CDFIs apply, 22 will be getting grants underneath this. And the grants are used for three primary purposes. The first being technical assistance, which is actually providing the borrowers, small businesses, the ability to quickly and efficiently apply this for financial programs. Also institutional capacity, which is allowing the CDFIs to purchase systems or equipment, as well as costs for them to continue operating. And then finally, a loan capital so that they can actually provide these loans or loan loss reserves, which we have done on other programs. To give you an idea, to date, this program has assisted over 27,000 disaster relief applications, securing about $92 million in the last year. And also the CDFIs in general that participate in our program do 80% of their lending, small business dollar lending, to minority and women businesses across the state. So the request to the board is to approve 22 grants up to $80,000 for these CDFIs that are listed in your appendix. We have a history of working with them. They have all been compliant in the past. This is an annual appropriation, and we do this competition annually every year. You can see the amounts range, and I'm happy to go into any further discussion about the program.
Mr. Chair, Linda Lacewell, given my role at DFS, I'm going to abstain on this one involving CDFIs, which are sometimes regulated by us.
Any questions? Comments? In that case, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Motion.
Item.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, the motion carries. Any other business with us, Pravina? We feel like, if there's something else you want to do with us, you might as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to preface the New York Ventures. I'm going to let the directors do that. But just to give you an idea, this is also different from the other projects you've seen. New York Ventures, we actually are requesting for the board to actually either make an initial investment into these companies or a follow-on investment. And these are different. In fact, we don't look at the jobs, but we're really looking to invest in the companies to ensure that we keep innovation and technology companies here as they grow. And as they grow, these are different from companies that would go for loans. These are companies that are sometimes pre-revenue, or if they're in revenue, they're pre-profit, and it's using a venture model. We, just prior to the board, we do our due diligence, and then we also go to an investment advisory committee, which are venture professionals across New York State, chaired by Howard Morgan, formerly of First Round, who then look at our due diligence, ask us questions, and we present to them twice, once when we're looking at a deal, and then after we've done our due diligence to ensure that we are getting outside expertise on the investments. We also are in a co-investment model, so we don't lead the round. We have professional venture firms that lead the round, and we invest with them on the same terms. And in addition, we then bring it to this board. But these are these projects haven't taken grants. We're actually asking for your approval to be able to invest into these companies. And we've had, for example, ACV Auctions was one of the companies we did invest, which is now our great unicorn out in Buffalo, New York, IPO'd. So the returns on these programs take a while, so they're not instantaneously, but it is about building that innovation and ecosystem. So I just wanted to give you a preview of the difference and where this funding comes from, and also to note that if the board would like to know more about our venture programs, we're happy to come and do a spotlight to show you what we've been doing and where we are. And I'm proud to report that on our venture fund, we have over 45% of our investments have been in minority and women-led venture firms and innovation companies.
So I would just jump in and say, two things. First of all, I would certainly welcome a presentation on this. I know the successes that you have had through this program, and I think that the board would enjoy seeing some of the different ways that that the monies have been invested and some of the successes you pointed to. The company in Buffalo that went public. And I do know that there are a few others that are showing incredible returns. I think that would be great. And then again, in terms of context, and Pravina talked about how this isn't on jobs per se, but this again is part of our overall mission to be investing in innovation in New York State and ensuring that we are thinking about the jobs of the future, that we are supporting entrepreneurship, and that we are investing in new businesses throughout the state. And I think that that's critical to ensure that there's the right, investments into areas of the future that combine the necessary research and commercialization of that research. And lastly, as Pravina did point out, we do support these companies, but we are also investing alongside those who are experts in venture capital. Howard Morgan is someone who I've known for many years, who's certainly one of the leaders in this field worldwide. But we are investing with experts and with those who are able to even conduct greater due diligence than we do. So Pravina, to you and your team, I thank you and appreciate all the hard work that you do, and I'm excited about some of the amazing returns that we're already seeing. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And Pravina, I just will echo Eric's sentiment, especially about the offer to come and talk to the board. Let's set that up for the very near future. I think we now turn to New York Ventures. I think first up is Clayton Besh, unless I'm mistaken. Clayton, are you there?
Thank you. Yes, I am. And thank you, Pravina, for sharing that update. New York Ventures would like to ask the board for authorization for the New York State Innovation Venture Capital Fund to invest up to $500,000 in Energy Materials Corporation's Series C preferred equity round of up to $10 million to be led by Mount Hope Capital of Greenwich, Connecticut, with a pre-money valuation of $30 million. Energy Materials Corporation, a Rochester-based company, plans over the next 2 years to manufacture a perovskite solar cell using industrial roll-to-roll technology, which would match or exceed the efficiency of today's standard silicon photovoltaic panels at a fraction of the price, which is particularly exciting to think about today on Earth Day. Perovskite is a hybrid organic-inorganic material that also converts sunlight to electricity like silicon-based PV panels. But the company's high-speed manufacturing model is a unique fusion of existing and proven roll-to-roll printing lines at Kodak, ultralight and flexible willow glass from Corning, and perovskite solar cell technology specifically designed for this roll-to-roll printing platform. Sunlight conversion efficiencies are currently the same as silicon at around 20%, with the product development roadmap to achieve over 30%, which has currently been proven in the lab. To dramatically accelerate the adoption of solar power globally, EMC's technology is revolutionary because production line is much cheaper and more scalable to build than the current silicon PV plants. This round will be used to develop the manufacturing process and produce prototype PV panels for the consumers to evaluate. And the next round of funding will be used to build a commercial scale production line in Rochester. Are there any questions?
Any questions? In which case, I will call for a motion.
Motion. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We turn to Jonathan Green. Jonathan, you there?
Good morning, Mr. Yes, I'm here. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, directors, and executives. New York Ventures, through the New York State Innovation Venture Capital Fund, is requesting authorization of an investment of $374,795 into a Series B1 preferred equity round in Ursa Space Systems. As a result of this investment, New York Ventures will retain its pro rata ownership of approximately 4.2% of Ursa on a fully diluted basis. New York Ventures has previously invested $1.8 million in Ursa in a Series B preferred stock offering in September 2019. Ursa is based in Ithaca, New York. They are a satellite intelligence as a service company that provide customers with geospatial intelligence based on standardized satellite radar from multiple vendors. Using this data, Ursa's software produces accurate 4D measurements of identifiable anthropogenic and natural objects, as well as changes within areas of interest. The market for such geospatial analysis is over $80 billion annually, with customers in energy, finance, logistics, and government sectors. Since closing its Series A, the company has increased revenues 3x. Products and services include basic and premium data analytic subscriptions, ready-made data sets, and trusted data partner and GIS consulting expertise. The company now has access to data from the largest network of radar satellites, representing over $6 billion of infrastructure. In addition to real-time data, Ursa has access to nearly 10 years of archive data. This has enabled Ursa to significantly reduce its imagery costs during the last few years. Ursa is an Ithaca-based company. They have 43 full-time employees, split 50-50 between women and men. A recent hire to note, industry veteran Nicole Robinson was hired in this spring, 2021, to be president, focused on business development and sales. Proceeds from this financing round will fund Ursa through anticipated break-even, focusing on increasing sales, development, and product teams, completion of new products, and entry into new market verticals. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll ask if there is a motion.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposition. The motion carries, and I think we now turn, if I'm not mistaken, to our counsel, Liz Fine, who has the floor for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, almost good afternoon, directors. This is Liz Fine. I'm the General Counsel, and we're seeking authorization with respect to three contracts for legal services. The first is a contract with Brian Cave, Leighton Paisner, and we're asking the board to approve an amendment to this contract in the amount of $500,000, increasing the contract from $950,000 to $1.45 million. And Brian Cave represents us on the Empire Station Complex Civic and Land Use Improvement Project. They do land use and environmental work. They are really outstanding, and that's the first contract. The second one is a contract for up to $300,000 with the firm of Applebaum, Katz, Brodsky, and that's with respect to the Atlantic Yards Land Use and Civic Project. This is a brand new law firm. It is formed by attorneys who used to work at Berger and Webb. Berger and Webb has represented us on condemnation matters on the Atlantic Yards project for many years, and this allows for continuity in that representation. And the third is a contract for up to $500,000 with Wilmer, Hale, Pickering, Hale, and Dorr to represent ESD in connection with an investigation by the New York State Attorney General and any related investigations. As you may know, Wilmer Hale is a very highly respected firm. They have a deep bench when it comes to investigations. And in particular, we are hiring the services of Boyd M. Johnson III. He was a former deputy U.S. attorney in the Southern District. He co-chairs Wilmer Hale's white-collar and investigations practice, and he would be joined by his partner, Hallie Levin, who is a seasoned litigator. So with that, you have
Liz,
materials.
can I just, one point of clarification, which is, if I'm not mistaken, because I think it matters, am I correct that that Wilmer and Boyd Johnson III have previously represented the agency?
Yeah, so yes, I was going to mention that, and it's in the materials. They represented us very ably on a prior matter, and you know, they have a very specific expertise. They know our agency well, and that's one of the reasons that we selected them to represent us on this matter.
Great.
So I'd be happy to answer any other questions. Mr. Chairman, if you have questions, or other board members.
I have none, but if others have questions, now's the time.
Mr. Chair, Linda Lacewell, on the third contract, I will abstain. Thank you.
Okay, just processing something in my head, but I think I'm okay unless Liz thinks otherwise. And for those who are curious about why I paused, I'm happy to explain it after the meeting. I think we can take all three together, with the exception of Commissioner Superintendent Lacewell is abstained on the third, and I'll ask for a motion on all three.
I move it.
Motion.
Second? I think we've got the second already. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. And one abstention with respect to item number 3 from Linda Lacewell. With that, I just want to say one more time, I really do appreciate everybody's indulgence. This was a longer meeting than usual, but I think it was a productive meeting. And again, I just want to thank Kevin and Liz and Eric and Rich Newman, all of whom have been more or less tortured by me as I started thinking about these issues over the last week, and have with good spirit and indulgence answered 1,000,001 questions. And I hope it makes for a better board process. And I look forward to speaking to the board members more about how to be more engaged and more effective in our jobs. And with that, I will ask if there is a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a great day, a great
Aye.
weekend, and we'll talk to you all next week, or next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.